Okay, so let's start. Whoever wants to join can join later. Okay, so we continue from yesterday. We did 67, unit 67, 68, and 69. Today we do unit 70 and 73. We basically look at women as bearer of culture and migration policies and its implication for women. We yesterday talked about the fact that earlier migration is a done thing which has happened historically. Earlier, it was purely male migration. Males used to migrate in terms of traders, in terms of labor, conquest, and so on, so forth. Women were only, party in terms of a spouse, mother, sister. Over a period of time, we use the term feminization of migration, where more and more women, single independent women, are migrating in terms of work, in terms of study. So let's take it from there. Parents continue. Now, the interesting part is while the parents continue to identify with the country of origin, the second gen children find themselves closer to the culture of adopted. Obviously, because they have grown up in an adopted country, they have got their education and specifically their friends, their peer group. So inevitably, in fact, there is a lot of confusion for the second generation because the parents try to push the home country culture, whereas they are growing up in a host country culture, and obviously then there are these issues. Process of assimilation integration is more effective with the second generation than the first generation, which again is the case. Remember the fact that when people migrate, they carry their culture along with it, they carry their identity along with it. It is not very easy for people to change just because they have migrated, just because they have moved from one place to another. It is not easy for people to change in terms of what they do of their, in terms of their daily work, in terms of their rituals, in terms of their religion, in terms of their culture, in terms of their language, and so on and so forth. 19th and 20th century, we said women were passive partners. Change in the 21st century, women a dominant role in immigration. Women are also the common link between the first and second generation and major transmitters. You also need to understand that initially, when women were only there as partners, a very docile and a dominant role, how would they, how would they spend their time, or how would they feel a belonging? The men are moved out for, let's say, as an indentured labor. The men is moving out, the man is moving out in terms of the labor. He's got his time fixed in terms of work. What does the woman do besides looking after the house and the children? And this was one way of security in terms of identity, culture, ritual, customs of the home country. This was a way for her to make herself home away from home. This was a way for her to connect with other people. And remember, women also transmits the culture to the children. Choice of leaving home for a new location decided by men. Owners of retaining memories of home, recreating them within the new context, associated with women, because women take care of the house, women take care of the children, and inevitably that is one, and in fact that's a security for the woman in terms of in an alien place. Central role as homemakers, keeper of diasporic culture. Traditional gender norms kept men engaged in work while women were confined. What I was speaking earlier, they were primarily mothers, wives, sisters. And so what else would they look forward to? So the way they looked forward to was in terms of a continuity of the home culture, to transmit rituals and culture to the children, to ensure a certain amount of continuity and security. Foundations of family life carry the responsibility for safeguarding cultural traditions. act as custodians of cultural heritage, employ multiple strategies for preservation and transmission of cultural heritage, reproduction of memories of home, family values, culture. Uh, the way, so two bases: A, to keep themselves occupied, and B, a security of, B, the secure way they are able to function in an alien place. Otherwise, what is there, what they call themselves as home? So this transmission of culture is what they call themselves at home. Form nodal point of interaction between home and host country culture, devise ways to handle the cultural differences, avoid the point of conflict between diverse social groups. This also, so think about the fact when you have you go to a religious place, or you take part in a cultural festival from the home country. That's the place you meet, social groups meet. It's a place where it avoids conflict between diverse social groups, and so on and so forth. Weight of cultural representation through prescriptions concerning the appropriate appearance, behavior, deeply internalized culture and religious tradition that is communicated to other social groups. What to wear in a particular function, how to behave, what food to make, how to conduct necessary rituals. Religion and culture have been politically mobilized, and women have been called upon as both cultural emblems and cultural police in relation to other women. So, because women are at the forefront for cultural transmission, they become politically mobilized. Diasporic women are not only cultural bearers of their families but also of their nations, because that's how they transmit culture from one generation to another. Nation through moral values, social norms, reproduce the national ethnic group in biological as well as cultural terms. So women take on a big role in terms of identity and identity transmission. Entitled Women, Nation, State lay the groundwork for understanding the connection between women and national ethnic processes. More often than not, one wonders how women, get mobilized in this political process. But remember the fact they are on the forefront of the cultural continuum, both inside a nation and whenever they go out. They focus on women as reproducers of boundaries of ethnic national groups, transmitters of culture. You see, in various cultural functions, religious functions, the role of women, where women outnumber men. Symbol of ideologically discourse used in the construction, reproduction, and transformation of ethnic national categories. So that is how then they become politically mobilized. They are used for political mobilization whenever political parties or political groups try and forward a particular political ideology. Indentured women. There was this case study of Indian diaspora in South Africa, unique struggle, and their spirit for community, family, and religion brought themselves. What I said was security. This became a sense of security for them. Remember, they are in an alien culture, an alien place, they don't know the language. They are sitting at home doing just about the routine tasks. So what got them occupied, what got their mind occupied, this was the way it happened. The practice of Indian tradition in a foreign land provide them with sense of normality, security, belonging, comfort, and a link, which I was talking earlier. It was security and a comfort. Remember, culture is a comfort thing. You are not, you are not in a happy place. What makes you happy is possibly a culture which includes, let's say, the type of food that you eat, or the festivals that you celebrate, which elevate your mood because it brings you comfort and a sense of security. Unique Indian identity enable them to preserve and recreate their culture in a new geographical context. The same thing we are seeing in different forms. but has also been reimagined and transmitted across generation over the last 160 years. In fact, today, so many times we get to hear the fact that Indians in the US and other Western countries seem to have carried on their traditional cultures which even the Indians in India have forgotten. So they are much more traditional than the Indians in India, because obviously they tend to hold on to things which we keep moving or reimagining. Sometimes identity groups have to face conflicts and struggle to retain their culture. Indians in South Africa in a cultural struggle to practice, preserve, and promote Indian heritage. And that's why you will see why minority group, ethnic groups fight to try and preserve their culture. You see it in the national context, you see it in the international context. People ask this question, why they are so hell-bent on maintaining this particular archaic. Whenever you are in a minority, you are in an alien place, you tend to fight back to maintain a culture. They strove to keep their cultural heritage, propagating language, food, culture, festivals, tradition. Forefront of struggles, transforming, for example, Durban into Little India, largest city outside India. So Mukherjee, 2011, women took upon themselves images, statues. So they carried statues of their gods. This was a way for them to remember their homeland. Jewelry, spices, food grain. Today, still, when Indians travel abroad for short term, long term, they carry spices. They carry specific Indian stuff that to be able to feel that comfort and security. Found their way into culture, cuisines, costume, tradition, and obviously remember these are not static. They are dynamic in the sense when then what typically happens is these aspects of culture then uh, transform with the host country cultures into something new, as we see how the cuisine, Indian cuisine has changed in coming in interaction with the South African cuisine and so on and so forth. Indian diaspora is westernized, assimilated well in majority South African culture, values, education, media, entertainment, and food. Maintain and carry forward their Indianness, retrieve and safeguards Indian values, culture, cuisine for future generations. So there is this article by Reddy on curry and race, gender, diaspora, and food in South Africa. And Indians, travel to South Africa again during a course of time. How they, interacted, incorporated. In fact, Gandhiji's struggle of non-violence started as an experiment in South Africa. Indigenized, localized, hybridized, gaining its resilience through cultural adaptations. So basically, cultural adaptations and accommodations. You don't totally lose your culture, but you adapt and accommodate. Food lies at the basis of this discourse, as do gender relations. Transnational, particularly women, have resisted overtly through political activism, coveted by closing land, maintaining strong ethnic and religious network. So, strangely, for example, the caste formations in of India have carried on in various ways into the Western world, into South Africa, everywhere. We have news items of caste discrimination in tech companies in the US. So, obviously, remember when human beings migrate, they don't migrate as bodies, but as a whole element, which includes identity, culture, etc., etc. Women have appropriated male dominated public space, create a sense of community, celebrate the indigenous rights of diaspora food. And this is the way they are also able to integrate into the host society. And remember, always the first connection in terms of integration or making, friends is through women. Examples from South Africa, Indian cuisine blended with South African flavors. Women incorporated traditional Zulu ingredients like amasi, ferment milk drink, relishes like chakalka, spicy vegetable condiment, South African, and this is by South African cuisine. Is what is called the bunny chow. It's a spicy Indian curry served in a bowl of hollowed out bread. It's an amalgamation of Indian and South African cuisine, created by Indian indentured laborers and is a staple food in South Africa. And it's just not in South Africa. Everywhere there is a certain accommodation and incorporation and so on and so forth. Assimilation, accommodation. South African Indians speak at least five Indian languages: Tamil, Telugu, Gujarati, Hindu, Urdu, along with English, Afrikaans, and Bantu language. Languages thus help preserve the diversity of Indian diaspora. Languages become a very important part of maintaining the identity. Religious festivals is another way. There's a cultural continuity, mix of Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jains, Zoroastrians, and agnostics. 80% of indentured labor came from about Hindus, about 12% Muslims, the rest for Christians. And they were called the Jahaz Bai because all of them traveled in a ship, these indentured labor. In fact, initially they tried to practice their caste, but because they were in a ship, then and they kept this segregation based on religion. However, as because these are long, arduous journeys, that is why they are called Jahaz Bais. Perform most religious functions at home, bound to domestic duties. Level of religious were traditionally determined by age and experience. Grandmothers, elder female guided ritual. That, and you will see mostly today also when you go to an Indian wedding or an Indian religious festival, you will see a lot of elder women guiding. It always is the case. Over successive generations, women have become more active economically, less interested in ritualists, which is always the case because as you get occupied with other things, then language, culture, rituals obviously take a back seat. Dresses and attires, traditional clothing patterns and style in foreign lands kept their roots intact. Result of creativity. Indian attire among Hindu, Muslims, and Christians has survived in Durban, though with some modification. And as I said, nothing is static. Every time somebody feels that things are static, there is nothing static in anything. Music, cinema, and television. So, Indian movies, TV channels are easily accessible. Younger generations of persons of Indian origin, Bollywood films, ZTV, B4U, NDTV, Sony, Tamil channels, Sun TV, KTV. And because India itself or Indians themselves are non homogeneous, obviously each ethnic group or each group maintains their subcultures. There is a larger Indian identity. And then there is all these, mix and match and improvisation of identities and culture which happens. So, for example, US Diaspora helps Philippines make World Cup history with country first ever. How diaspora women then help in various, with women back home? They make that channel. US dual national players. So, in fact, and this is what we have been talking over a period of time. Immigration is good both for the host country as well as home country. Immigration has never been bad economically, culturally, or otherwise. The political identities, the current political identity and this anti-immigration sentiment is basically a political mobilization by petty politicians to try and look at their political base, essentially it's not a good economic idea. It is never a good economic idea. Many countries have enacted restrictive policies to safeguard their workers, on enactment of regulating policies for women migrant. Now, obviously, do you regulate, do you create policies for, regulating migrants, to stop migrants from coming? As we talked about yesterday, every time countries raise their borders or stop migrants from coming in, more often than not, migrants move underground in terms of illegal routes, uh, which is detrimental to both migrant and to the host and home country. Large number of migration policies for women are restrictive in nature. These policies regulate migration flow, reduce possibilities for regular and legal migration. On other hand, believe that regulating policy stand as a major tool to protect women migration from exploitation. Now, the point is, people will move when they have to move, considering they feel they are getting real or perceived betterment of life. So more often than not, there has this discourse between policies for regulating and no policies for regulating has been an old discourse. There needs to be some, and unless more discussion is happening on this particular schools of thought, inevitably, there are ad hoc policies which get made, which does not help neither the home nor the host nor the migrant. H-1B visa plays a vital role in US. Legal entry permit for temporary workers permits the spouse and unmarried children of temporary workers. Now, now countries are talking about the spouse or the partner not being able to join. How does this help? Because they are looking at the fact that if a spouse joins, the chances of the migrant staying back in the country, in the host, increases to prevent these migrants to stay back in the host country. They are denying, visas to spouse or partners, uh, and then every time you put a restriction on legal processes, those processes grow underground and become illegal. The government of India has allowed women to out migrate for work, but with certain conditions. There is through state-run recruiting agencies, for example, non-resident Keralite affairs route, NOCA, overseas development, employee promotion. See, there are these, state-run recruiting agencies, but because of the size and diversity and the need, a lot of people and various norms which the state-run agencies want, there are these illegally run agencies or not recognized agencies which then recruit these people, leading to a lot of trafficking happening and so on and so forth. Nurses policy framework is mandatory to have an immigration for nurses. 18 ACR countries require immigration. There is a ECR check which India does to listed 18 ECR countries and has not passed 10th class. Idea is to regulate. So a couple of countries, their out migration are a part of the unit. You can These can be used as examples when you are crafting an answer for your examination or for your assignment. Early India was the most popular destination, not anymore. Gulf countries all boom opened economy, many restrictions for women migrants up till 90, difficult to get women to get permission to work abroad, economic situation, women's education, increased demand for women in the labor market has made government ease the process. So that's Nepal. Foreign Employment Act permitted women workers to migrate, but with restrictive clauses. Foreign employment to children and women without the consent of a guardian. So in a lot of countries, this consent of guardian, and in patriarchal societies, more often than not, there is restriction for movement of women, which is not correct, because in a oppressive marriage or an oppressive situation, the women get stuck. Guardian stands for a mother or a father of an unmarried woman. Now, this also is a lot of debated. So, for example, if there is a voting age of 18 or 20, so a woman is mature enough to vote and select a legislator, but is not, is not enabled to take a decision about her life and her work. Considered as a guardian for a married woman, according to no gender discrimination made while sending workers for unemployment, according to that. It was proposed that permission from guardians and local government is required for the first time traveler. The first time line of mobility clause clearly indicates both restrictive clauses as well as non-discriminatory clauses of free movement of mind. So some might argue it is restrictive. The government might argue this is to protect women from being trafficked or being exploited in terms of vulnerability. We already had seen that migration for women is both empowering as well as makes her vulnerable. Let's look at Sri Lanka and out migration. Major push for migration for the country, relaxation policies of registration on departure, encourage both male and women to look for. Countries have also realized the fact that migration is good because migration leads to remittances coming back. Also, because countries, especially South Asian countries, when they are not able to generate enough employment, it becomes a problem to manage these young people. And if they are able to find work outside, good for the country. Women accounted 80s, women accounted for majority of migrant workers. 1993-97, women accounted for 75% of migrant. Informed work decline due to policy implemented by the country. Skilled workers over unskilled workers and casual workers hamper the migration for female workers. And we are also seeing the fact that women, because of education levels or skill levels, more often than not, and now with this neoliberal, economy, with informal economy coming in, they prefer women with low skills, low education, because then they can, push them for lower salaries and basically regulate them. There's something called an FBR, Family Background Report, restricted the flow of migrant women workers from the country, formulated by 2007, implemented by Foreign Employment Promotion and Welfare. As domestic workers need to document their reproductive and family history for applying to overseas. So if you see, more often than not, even in the Western countries, for example, in the US, if you see this ban on abortion, essentially it's a male-dominated discourse on a female's right, on their reproductive rights, on their bodies. And it is couched in various religious and other, political symbolism. Protect the well-being of children. On the other hand, it is clearly restricts the mother of children from migrating abroad for work. So it is ostensibly said to protect children, but essentially you are trying to then say that the mother or the women does not know well enough about her well-being and her children's well-being, and the government knows better. So this is again a discourse, a 2-point thought process by various people. Cap minimum age for migrating women. The age bar is different for different. Cap the minimum age of 40-55 years for all countries and shifted downwards. It was 50 years. It reduced to 45 years. Introduced two categories, one with children and another with. So you see, state is still extremely powerful in terms of restricting or allowing. And this restricting or allowing is basically to control migrants, both the sending states as well as the receiving states. Let's look at Pakistan. Pakistan has the lowest female labor participation rates in the world. Lowest female participation rate, many reasons: low education, low skill, and the invisible informal sector. Involvement of women in overseas migration remained low. 48,807 went abroad, between 1771 and 2019, 0.4%. There is a restrictive, the religion also has a restrictive basis for this out migration, patriarchal society. decision of family members, government policies not encouraging, has a restrictive age limit policy. Age limit is 35 years for women workers in the domestic work and a relaxation of 5 years in special cases. So the governments basically restrict or allow, take consent from male guardian, can be father, brother, husband, or son. Absence of male member, a female member such as mother can give consent as domestic workers or nurses to Gulf countries because of cultural similarities and difference. Let's look at Bangladesh, major labor supplier countries in South Asia. Again, Bangladesh, female migrants, a low proportion. Migration Forum Asia, female represent only 1%, better than Pakistan, but still lower. Cultural, education, skill, and policy influence. Travel alone, unaccompanied by family members, was negligible, largely due to severe restriction placed on female migration, partly relaxed in 2003 and 2006. So it's a fight that females have to do. Cost, and another factor is cost of migration is high. And if migrant workers use private recruiting agencies, largely private recruiting, and the cost of workers is so high that most people cannot afford migration. In fact, we have seen that once people become economically well off, migration increases. Tend to pay the cost of migration in advance, as they mostly like to rely on local agents or dalal. And that is why a lot of females get stuck in the trafficking rings. So, for example, there is this article in Asia Pacific, how after she sold her land to generate 70,000 takas to travel to Dubai, realized that the middlemen duped her. These are multiple cases because unless there is some state regulation of these agencies, then we had seen yesterday how Middle East has this kafala system where there are private recruiting agencies, which a large portion of these private recruitment agencies are basically dealing in trafficking. There is something called Overseas Employment and Migrant Act 2013. Interest to provide employment contract, right to information, right to file a civil suit. In Bangladesh, we are talking about Bangladesh. There is an expats welfare and overseas policy 2016, which is ministries including foreign affairs, home affairs. Again, these are some things that you don't need to typically know. You can, if you're crafting an answer, you can say there are certain policies which have come in place over a period of time to try, and these are women specific policies. There are general laws. In fact, there are general laws done by the ILO in terms of labor laws, promote workers' right, convention regarding decent work for domestic workers, valuable guidance that promotes measures to be taken to protect domestic workers. Face a particular problem because domestic work always comes in the informal economy, and it's largely invisible because it's informal economy and largely invisible. So obviously regulations cannot happen. The government cannot oversee, regulate. There is a convention of domestic workers get protected against. Say, for example, we had this news item about billionaires Hinduja not providing enough salary for their domestic workers, putting them in harsh conditions. They were arrested in Switzerland. But remember, Switzerland or Sweden or Finland and all these European countries are very small countries. Regulation or oversee becomes easier for bigger countries. For more diverse countries like India, regulation oversee is extremely difficult. And then there are complexities of laws both at the center and the state level. And because of over centralization for a large country like India, managing becomes extremely difficult. All forms of discrimination against women, CEDAW 1979, protection of rights of women, right to employment, decent work condition, social security. So basic frameworks are there. Now the problem is in terms of implementation, oversee. Protection of the rights of migrant workers and their families, 1990. Migrants subject to legal restrictions, outline rights of migrant workers to same working. Essentially, remember, migrant workers are human beings. They might be undocumented, but they are not aliens, they are human beings. And when nations, in the context of what is happening in the US, the way they are treating migrant immigrant workers who are undocumented, as though they are criminals, which is not the case. In fact, host countries should ensure that undocumented migrants get documented, or there should be a proper way for sending migrants back, because at the end of the day, if you are not taking care of human rights, then what's all this story all about? Freedom of thought and expression, religion, access to courts, UN protocol to prevent suppressed person, especially you covers exploitative situation, provides migrants with right to human treatments, transnational. The Palermo Protocol, you will hear about the Palermo Protocol. We'll read about it in MDI 9 and 10. Issues and challenges include women are largely semi and unskilled workers. A lot of them are illiterate, or their education levels are low, hired at low wages. COVID-19 didn't help the situation. Domestic workers remain unnoticed because domestic workers is predominantly an invisible, informal economy, vulnerable to exploitation. And in fact, a large number of women in domestic work are basically trafficked. They are not adequately given food to eat, wages, or proper resting facility is one of the biggest challenges. And we have also seen over a period of time under various units that this cannot be handled by one nation or by governments. This needs to involve multiple nations. Need to involve multiple stakeholders, non-government organizations, community-based organizations, because at the end of the day, the story is about the human being. So let's sum up. Critical role played by women as carriers of cultural tradition, role of wife, mothers, and homemakers. Women have been tasked with regarding socialization, next generation values. But we have also seen as women get economically independent, educated, get into the workforce, or take up professions, uh, they spend less time in culture, in religion, etc. Patriarchal framework culture are supposed to preserve it, barrier of Indian tradition. Self-dependency gives them an opportunity to assert independence and redefine their role. Restrictive labor laws, how national laws regulate outflow and inflow of women migrant. Provisions enacted International Labour Organization for protection of migrant and domestic workers. In fact, one of the reasons of protection of migrant women was all the many places they allow even students to bring in their spouses or their partners, because at the end of the day, the well-being of a person, of a student, is also conditioned on a partner or a spouse. So that is one of the reasons. So these general laws were looked at protection of migrant, of migration, of migrants, workers, as well as other conventions. So there are references and suggested readings you can read at the end of the units. And with this, we come to an end of this particular thing. So what we will do is we will end the class here. We will meet again at between 5 and 7. We'll pick up unit 74, where we are talking about remittances and how it affects development. Have a nice afternoon. See you at 5 o'clock today evening. Bye-bye then. Thank you, Sada sir.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
okay, fine,
Bye.
fine.